Hey, how's it going and welcome back to my channel. The last batch of videos we've talked about drama, Philippine artists battling politics, and a lot of other beefy topics. So today, let's talk about something a little lighthearted. But before we get into the video, let's do a quick comment shout out from my last video. Internet, support Filipino artists. Also internet, let's put sanctions on Russian people and bully Russian artists. Yeah, I don't think they're the exact same situations. But yes, artists are really getting the short end of the stick pretty often. Please be careful about this topic, Mohammed. You can get targeted by trolls hired by the new president. Imagine being a president and hiring trolls to target a YouTuber who made a 10-minute video breaking down why artists are losing jobs because of your government instead of trying to find ways to develop the political and economic state of your country. Couldn't be me. Anyways, today we're going to explore the wonderful world of WikiHow. Also 10 points for the alliteration I did there. George R.R. Martin signed me up. I think I'm ready to start writing books now. WikiHow is a website where you learn to do pretty much anything. You can learn important and life-changing skills that will help you later on in the future, like how to stop AirPods from reading texts, how to respond when an ex reaches out, how to be more vulnerable in relationships. So basically, WikiHow is just YouTube and Google search on discount with very questionable answers to the most basic questions. Which brings us to our video of today. What will happen if you try to learn how to draw on WikiHow? What kind of lessons should we expect? And after taking some of these lessons, do we become an exceptionally good artist after we practice them? Let's find out. The first tutorial we're going to look at is this one that says how to draw, and it has over 2 million views with a 4-star rating. So it's definitely going to be impactful.
Learning how to draw can seem daunting, especially when you look at masterpieces by your favorite artists. However, it's important to keep in mind that even the great masters started as beginners.
Okay, some early motivation to keep us inspired and ready to become the next Bob Ross with the blink of an eye. I'm already pretty excited and ready to start drawing and painting figures like Sam does arts. Let's see what the next step is. Lines? Squiggly lines?
If you're just learning to draw, start by carefully drawing the pencil over the page in a straight line. Practice holding your hand at different angles to see what gives you the most control over the pencil, along with what feels most comfortable.
Okay, not to be that guy, but isn't this super basic elementary stuff? I'm not even trying to be nitpicky here, but I was expecting some actual drawing tips that can be practical and immediately applied to draw a character or figure or something. But I guess this is very basic and surface level, so beginners can have a base to start from and also use as a warm-up to loosen their wrists so they can have better confidence with their lines and strokes, I guess.
Draw a simple shape, such as a circle, and add an imaginary light source to your page. Use a pencil to lightly shade in the areas farthest from your light source, while leaving the area closest to the light source unshaded.
Okay, this is theoretically good advice, especially for shading and bringing out the forms in your drawing. But why does your ball look like frozen fart? The shading just looks...
Cut the cameras.
Usually when shading a simple circle to show value and tonal structure, the example is expected to show the highlights, midtones, and shadows, and then more advanced techniques like ambient occlusions, reflected light, and all that, so the artist can understand how these elements all work together and transfer that knowledge in bigger drawings. But your example is just... Maybe it's just the way they did the shading by smoothing out everything to the point where you can't tell what is what, even when there's multiple other ways you can shade and still show the tonal values without making your drawing look muddy. And the next step literally does the same thing, keeping the value structure basic and just emphasizing on using a cast shadow to make your drawing feel grounded in reality. When in reality, making a realistic drawing requires a deep understanding of how lighting and forms work together and how to convey texture and materials by simplifying details and knowing how to direct the eye in an image to areas where the viewer should focus. This is already turning out to be a pretty great tutorial if you want to get good at making basic surface level drawings, which I'm sure 90% of you are not trying to learn. Next, they go into breaking down an object into shapes, which I'll have to give them credit is actually really good advice, since it's easier to establish the general shapes and planes of an object before breaking them down into smaller shapes for your drawing, which is pretty much the way I draw. But then they talk about this where they say pick an object to draw and follow the outlines of the image with your eye while drawing them at the same time, which is just confusing. Like, what's the point of doing all that? I don't get the significance of drawing like this. Unless you're, of course, Kim Jong-gi, who has spent an entire lifetime just practicing drawing. So basically, starting with a sketch is pretty much useless to him at this point. But you're not Kim Jong-gi, so save yourself the shame of looking down at your drawing and seeing an absolute abomination, making the rest of us press F in the chat to pay our respect for the monstrous horrors you have manifested before you. So for the most part so far, WikiHow is turning out to be the worst place to learn how to draw or even search for drawing tutorials. But these next images are literally going to blow your mind with how correct and ridiculously wrong they are at the same time.
Wait till you see the. No, 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 no. Look at the top.
My problem with this is these tutorials are supposedly made by professionals, or at least people who claim to be certified and professional artists. But for the drawings to be this bad, it just makes me feel weird about this entire thing. If these drawings were made by a child or just someone starting out and figuring their way in art, it's totally understandable since everyone started with bad drawings and then gradually improved with time as they kept on practicing the fundamentals of art. But these drawings are made by professionals who are supposed to have mastered the fundamentals of art before teaching them to others and sharing what they have learned from their years of experience and practice. But experience is telling me whoever is writing this needs a tutorial themselves. Not only do these drawings look flat, simplistic, and lack any form of dynamism to manipulate the audience into thinking they're good, the basic structure and techniques these professional artists use to build on are just downright bad and impractical. The rectangle and oval to form the body are good enough shapes to build on, especially if the character you're drawing is meant to look simplified or cartoony, but using them to flesh out and finalize your drawing is just going to make your final drawings look like what you'll see on a Friday night out with friends after you've had one too many drinks and are just ready to hit the hay. The proportions are bad, the forms are wonky, and the anatomy is not close to being accurate enough to be considered realistic and is basically nowhere to be found. The method used here is extremely questionable and makes me wonder what they were smoking while doing this, because it's probably the good stuff that makes them forget to solve problems and happy enough to end up with something that looks like this. What even is this? The drawing just lacks any form of dynamism or even just a simple gesture, and it looks like too many steps were skipped at the beginning and were only thought of after the fact. Whenever you're trying to make a good drawing of a figure, the first thing, which should be the most important thing on your mind, is the pose. Nailing the pose and gesture of the drawing just helps you solve all the problems of having a dynamic drawing, instead of having to fix them later by patching together wonky parts like a spoiled toy. The hands and legs play an important part in getting good fluid gesture and movement in your drawings, and leaving them till the last minute just makes your drawing look stiff and less exciting, especially when you just end up drawing them wrong. For beginner artists, drawing with a solid skeleton underneath or just starting off with shapes and gestures are basically the best ways to build off any pose or character drawings, and then you can proceed into breaking down each shape into smaller details and thinking about placing the correct anatomy around your character. And even if you don't get the anatomy correct, having an interesting and dynamic pose for your character and using gesture to properly convey the feeling of that pose will look so much better than having correct, convincing anatomy on a bad pose. And then the tutorial goes ahead to teach us how to practice gesture drawing after failing to mention that earlier in the beginning, which should have been more practical to avoid making mistakes, but then go ahead to totally contradict themselves in the example they give of what gesture drawing looks like. According to them, a gesture drawing is a basic sketch that captures both form and a sense of movement. Just a few simple lines to capture the shapes and movements of what you see. But in their own example, their drawing looks finished with with their character fully in clothes and even has shoes on. That looks like much more than a few lines to show movement. Who draws shoes in a gesture drawing, for Christ's sake? Gesture drawings are meant to be quick, simple, and solely focus on showing the movement and direction of the pose, which is why emphasis is placed on understanding the line of action, and poses with mostly dynamic movements are used for gesture drawings rather than bland, stiff, and casual boring poses. These tutorials are doing well at teaching us the theory part of art with just little bits of information here and there, while leaving out the mostly useful and practical steps that help you become an artist and gradually improve in whatever genre of art you decide to pursue. I'll rate this tutorial a 5 over 10 because half of it is actually good, useful information, but the presentation and poorly drawn examples with some of the steps missing are just misleading and left for the viewer to ponder on, like the return of their dad. The next tutorial we'll go over is how to draw a human head, and it has over 700,000 views, but it's not written by a self-proclaimed professional artist, which is quite honest and allows us to take everything we see here with a grain of salt. Now this one is way better than the first tutorial in terms of just skill and how the final drawing looks. The setup and sketch of the drawing is practical and pretty easy for beginners to follow. The strokes are more confident and carry a sense of a decent amount of experience and trial and errors over the years, and you can feel like this person has been drawing for quite some time. And even if we can't compare their final drawing with some of our favorite artists' works, you can still tell that this person knows their onions. They start off with drawing the head from basic shapes and use guidelines to place the landmarks for the features of the face, which is probably one of the most commonly used step-by-step process for drawing a face by every artist I know, including myself. And then they proceed to drawing the eyes, eyebrows, nose, and mouth, and making sure each of them sit correctly on the face before drawing in the hair. Everything looks good so far, but my only problem with this drawing is the sheer lack of volume of the hair, and it's a problem I always found myself making subconsciously because I wasn't thinking about it carefully. If you look at his drawing, you will see the hair sits closely on the head, close to the forehead, making the head look smaller than it should be and making the hair feel less voluminous. And I'm sure some of you are going to say, but Mohammed, you wise and trusty artist with a voice so calm it smoothens bed sheets. What if the character I'm drawing has short hair? Doesn't that mean the hair will be close to the head? To which I reply in a calm, cool voice, no, it apparently doesn't. And this simple tutorial from the magnificent TB Choi shows us why. No matter what hairstyle you draw on your character, hair will always have different sections, with each section having volume giving the hair shape from the front, side, and back. And thinking about these sections when sketching or drawing your character, and then carefully drawing the hair above the head of the character, helps to convey a much more convincing hairstyle on the character, and also proves your character is not a blockhead with an empty brain, like how I feel every morning after posting a YouTube video. The rest of the tutorial is pretty much the same, going through the motions of drawing a profile of the head, and my only comment here will be how the nose, mouth, and chin are all sitting on the same line straight down, but in traditional drawing tutorials, they always slant diagonally from the nose to the chin. But I'm guessing it may differ for some people since there's over 1 billion people in the world, with each person having unique facial features that each sit totally different from the next person. So finding someone that actually looks like this shouldn't be that hard or impossible. I think my final judgment on WikiHow is, don't go looking for water in the desert in the middle of summer. Even if miracles exist, you'll probably die of thirst before one happens to you. WikiHow may be good for learning how to do several things, but I don't think it's the perfect place to practice drawing or even search for drawing tutorials. There's tons of artists with resources and drawing tutorials that you can learn from and come back from time to time to learn new tips they have posted. And there are also artists with Patreons and Discord servers just like my own, link in the description, dedicated to teaching art to both beginners and artists who are well advanced in their careers but still want to sharpen their fundamental skills. So you're better off learning from them than putting all your eggs in one basket, which is WikiHow. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Please leave a like on the video, share it with a friend, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Mohammed Agbadi, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. new here. Alright, all you pretty penguins, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.